is everybody doing? How is everybody? Folks, I always like to talk about what's going on in my beloved home of South Africa. The political situation, the state of the economy, what are we expecting to happen moving forward? And I've made some very dire videos in the past about the future of South Africa. I'm gonna share those videos in the comments below where I predicted that South Africa will become a failed state. I think I made that video around 2021 because at the time things were very bad and some South Africans believed that no, things are just going to get better. It's a matter of time. Just to vote the ANC out and things are going to change. And I don't think so. Yeah, vote the ANC out, yes, we need to do that. With the ANC in power, things will get bad even much more quicker. But even if we do vote the ANC out, there doesn't seem to me to be a path out of South Africa being a failed state, because all of the political parties who are contesting power in South Africa, every single one of them have failed to propose a viable plan of how are we going to deal with the unemployment rate that is 45%. A country with an unemployment rate of 45% is a country that is virtually failed. And that's, when I say 45%, I'm talking about the expanded definition of unemployment. The narrow definition is 33% currently. None of these parties have proposed that they're going to do anything that's going to do anything. Almost all of them, what they are running on is that they are not the ANC or that they are not corrupt. But they have not proposed anything that's going to bring us out of the mess that South Africa is in. I've, of course, read their manifestos, I've read their documents, I've read their websites, I'm very thorough in reading and actually looking in terms of what it is that people are proposing, and none of them have a viable plan that's going to save South Africa from being a failed state. And that includes the top four parties, which is the African National Congress, number 2, the Democratic Alliance, number 3, the Economic Freedom Fighters, number 4, the Inkatha Freedom Party. I might even include the 5th largest party, which would probably be Freedom Front Plus. You might even include, just for good measure, the UDM, which has a strong support base in the Eastern Cape. And then you look at all the other smaller parties which have like 1 or 2 seats in parliament, like whether it's Arise or Rise Mzansi or Action SA or Bosa, which I think that's the party that Mmusi Maimane is leading. Not a single one of these parties have a plan. Not a single one of them. And it also explains in terms of why there were more people in the last 3 elections who did not vote than there were people who voted. Voter turnout in South Africa is very low. And one of the reasons why it is very low it's because people look at the options that are there before them and they are just scratching their heads. They don't know what the hell is going on. So I just want to share some of the negative news that are coming out of South Africa, like unemployment rate increased from 32.9% to 33.2% in the first quarter of 2025. The South African GDP grew by a mere 0.1% in the first quarter of 2025. With that being said, that the South African economy has not grown by more than 0.5% year on year in the past 5 years. There hasn't been a year in the past 5 years where the South African economy has grown by more than 0.5%. You can even take it to in the past 10 years, the South African economy has not grown by more than 0.8 to 1%. It is horrible, folks. It's not just that things are bad right now. Things have been bad for a very long time, and they are not getting better, and they are getting worse. Here are a few international companies that are leaving South Africa, that have decided to leave because it's just not worth staying in South Africa. The consulting giant Bain and Company, the American company, recently announced that it is shutting down its consultancy operations in South Africa. It's winding down its consultancy, which is just leaving its Johannesburg office to serve its clients in the rest of Africa and some parts of the Middle East. The UK banking giant HSBC also recently announced that it will exit South Africa, with First Rand set to take over its clients on the 31st of October 2025. They announced that they are leaving last year in September 2024. IG Group, online trading provider IG Group, recently shut down its operations in South Africa, though local customers can still, to some extent, receive some services. Tupperware. We all know of Tupperware, which has been a part of South Africa for many, many, many years. The dishes and domestic container manufacturer, which is an American company. Florida, it's based in Florida. They already announced that they are exiting South Africa. They announced that in 2024, and they are liquidating and restructuring their South African operations. Anglo American recently divested its interest from Anglo Platinum, which is something that I covered in a video in the past. And Anglo Platinum has already renamed and launched as a separate company and got listed on the JSE as a different company. Anglo American, on its side, has been divesting its South African interest in the past couple of years. They started selling some of their interest by selling Anglo Coal, which was then renamed to Tungela Resources. If you are in the mining space, you know with what that company is. And then they dumped Anglo Platinum, which is the largest platinum producer in the world, because they are not happy with the uncertainty and the political environment of the South African market. And one of the reasons why, for instance, Anglo American was not able to be sold to, was it BHP who was trying to buy them last year, or was it Glencore? It's because of their large exposure to the South African market, which international investors are not happy with that kind of exposure. Anglo Platinum, on its part, has been renamed to Valterra Platinum. Okay. They, Anglo American, will continue to maintain their majority stake on Kumba iron ore, which also I expect that in the next couple of years they will divest their interest from Kumba iron ore. While we are speaking of Kumba iron ore and the steel and aluminium industry in South Africa, this is a sector that has been struggling for close to 20 years now. And if nothing is done, and nothing that this government is doing indicates that they're gonna do anything to save our steel industry. And also remember that a couple of months ago, if not 2 months ago, ArcelorMittal announced a closing down of one of their largest mills or plants in South Africa. And they are currently negotiating the future of their remaining plants with the South African government. And from what I'm hearing, that is that the South African government is in the process of deciding whether to impose steel tariffs in order to protect the steel industry from going into extinction. But then for me, my question is that what took you so long? What took you so long? Because we know that China is dumping steel in South Africa, not because their steel is competitive, but because China is engaged in all kinds of anti-competitive behavior, subsidies, and all kinds of selling products at below the production price in which they are producing them, because they are trying to drive out competitors in every market that they are engaged in, and it works. So then they are literally dumping stuff in South Africa, and they've no South African government have known this for at least 10 years. But they're not doing anything about it. They've already destroyed our clothing and textile industry. They've destroyed our electronics manufacturing sector. And now, if nothing changes, they are actually now virtually, because I think more than 15 to 20,000 jobs will be lost because of ArcelorMittal shutting their Newcastle plant. And not a single one of these opposition parties have said anything about these things that I'm listing here. None of them have a plan for any of these things. Shell also, the international petroleum, oil and gas company, sold its downstream business in South Africa, which includes hundreds of petrol stations that are in the country, or gas stations, to my fellow American friends. Shell is the third largest gas station operator in South Africa, behind Engen and Estron Energies, which was previously Caltex. Guys, it is tough, guys. Another company that is leaving South Africa is Hensoldt. Hence sold. Reports indicate that the German radar maker Hensoldt is exploring options for its South African optronics business, including a potential sale. So Hensoldt is working with Deloitte to review its business in South Africa. It is expected to attract interest from companies in the field, as well as options for buyouts. If I were to mention the other companies who have left the country in the past 5 years, I would be here for at least an hour. Guys, things are bad. Things are beyond bad, being bad. And my view is that South Africa will be a failed state, and that there's nothing that can be done at this point to save South Africa. Because the path that a nation takes to become a failed state is that process that is called the process of the ball frog, a frog in boiled water, where when you put a frog in boiling water, it immediately jumps out of the boiling water. But if you put a frog in cold water, then you turn up the heat, slowly it stays there until it dies inside. That's exactly what's happening with South Africa. But also, death tends to happen slowly for any living organism. Death and destruction and decline. Yeah, so it's something that very few people recognize, because people tend to have this optimistic view about their nation, that no, we're going to turn things around, no, we're going to be okay. But also people, because people will always love their nation. Obviously, it's a similar way in terms of how people, even though Zimbabwe has been going through whatever it has been going through for the past 40 years, people stayed in Zimbabwe, they didn't leave their country because it's their country. So there's a lot of that as well, but there's also some misfounded and misplaced optimism where people think that no, we're going to be fine. No, we're not going to be fine. We're not going to be fine. There's not a single thing, there's not a single indicator that shows us that we're going to be fine. Even now, with the conflict between the South Africa and the United States with regards to trade tariffs, they are not even trying to negotiate a way out of that situation. A lot of the nations who have actually put in an effort and in great earnest have negotiated with the Trump administration, have come up with a win-win situation and a deal. There's a countless of nations that I've already talked about that have reached a deal with the U.S. government. South African government is not even pretending to negotiate. It's I can list issues and issues that the South African people are facing, that the government is not even pretending to address. And for me, the issue is not just that the ANC government is not doing this. I'm also saying that the other parties also don't have a cooking clue of what to do with these issues. Also remember that this government that the South Africa currently has is not just an ANC government. It is what is called loosely a government of national unity, which means it includes all of these other large opposition parties. So they're in the room when decisions are made, in terms of they have a voice, in terms of suggesting policy positions that would actually make a difference. But none of them have come up with anything that is useful. They've not even come up in public to say, okay, this is what we would do, but we don't have enough support in the government of national unity. They don't have a cooking clue of what to do. They really, this is why I'm saying that it is a matter of fact now that South Africa will become a failed state. As sad, as unfortunate as I wouldn't want that to happen, but that's what's going to happen. Cheers, folks. I'll see you on the next one. Tell me what you think on the comments below.